Deputy Director, British Council India, to deliver the welcome address. Michael.
Thanks very much, Anupama. And good evening, everyone, and a really warm welcome this evening to the British Council. It's really a pleasure and a privilege to welcome you all here for this evening's launch of the Great Eastern Hotel, the much anticipated second work of fiction of acclaimed writer, filmmaker and photographer Ruchir Joshi. Much anticipated. I learned this now that the first one came out in 2021, so it's been a long time, 2001. So it's been a long time coming, and it's great now that we have the second work. British Council has a mission to foster connections between the UK and India through education, through arts and through culture. And this evening's event, as we celebrate a wonderful new novel by an Indian author who has very close ties with and has studied in and worked with the UK, is a great reflection of that mission. The event holds a particular resonance, not only because of the novel's literary merit, but also due to the poignant timing. As many of you know, tomorrow, which is 9th of May, is celebrated as the birth anniversary of Tagore, according to the Bengali calendar. And it is fitting then that the Great Eastern Hotel opens with a powerful scene, the passage of Tagore's hearse through the streets of Calcutta in August 1941. And this is a really evocative moment, drawing the novel's key characters together against the backdrop of a city on the cusp of war, resistance, and change. This scene is really a wonderful example of Ruchir's storytelling, which immerses us in Calcutta's layered history and emotional landscapes, offering a sweeping yet intimate portrayal of individuals caught in the currents of their time. The book is like the Great Eastern Hotel itself. It places us, it becomes a place where lives intersect and where memories and politics and personal journeys meet. Ruchir is certainly no stranger himself to diverse forms of cultural expression. He is an alumnus of the Charles Wallace India Trust. For those of you who don't know, Charles Wallace India Trust it's a very prestigious scholarship for artists, writers, academics from all across South Asia to spend time studying or pursuing research in the UK. And his work spans columns in Telegraph, filmmaking and photography. His distinctive voice and sharp observations have contributed immensely to India's literary and artistic landscape. And we're delighted that Ruchir will be in conversation with writer and historian Nicole Kesavan in a dialogue that promises to be engaging, expansive and thought-provoking. At the British Council, we remain committed to fostering meaningful cultural engagement between the UK and India. Through events like tonight's, we continue to celebrate the power of literature to provoke dialogue, inspire empathy, and help us to make more sense of our shared histories and future. And let me just give a quick plug for British Council for any of you who may be new to the British Council or who may be visiting the British Council for the first time in a long time. We have lots and lots of events like this, book launches, cultural events, education events, performances. We have a really active library upstairs that has all sorts of exciting resources, including a digital library where you can access the resources from any phone, from the comfort of your home. If you'd like to connect with us, please reach out to Anupama or another member of staff during the event or after the event, and we can tell you how to sign up for our newsletter so you can find out more about our events, and we'd love to see you more frequently here at the British Council. Thank you all for joining us this evening to celebrate this remarkable novel and its author. Can I extend a huge thanks especially to HarperCollins, our partner, the publisher of the book, our partner in organising this event. We look forward to a really rich conversation and an evening filled with ideas. ideas, reflections, and connections. Now I'd like to invite Ruchir and Mukul to the stage to start the conversation.
If we can take a moment and everybody can get a picture clicked with the book, because it's a long, yes, in front of the table. If everybody can grab it. Thank you so much. Over to you, Mukul again.
Is this working? Do I need to do something?
You need to switch it on. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Anupama. Thanks, Michael. It's really nice to be back to this auditorium. Michael was talking about the British Council's mission. My childhood memories go back to a British Council not located here, in the IFAX building on Ruchir Joshi, where inter-country relations were fostered by air conditioning and a completely wonderful cold water dispensing thing, which one must marvel at. It was, and those wonderful sort of wooden newspaper racks where you read week-old newspapers. It was a kind of coming of age. But we are here to celebrate this magnificent novel. I have to tell you that I just had a cataract surgery, and in the nature of cataract surgeries, you have them one at a time. So my left eye had surgery done on it, with the result that I couldn't wear progressive lenses, so I couldn't read with this eye. So I can report that I've read 900 pages inside of 3 days with one eye. So this is a very excellent novel. The interesting thing is that it's all of 900 pages. Well, Ruchir insists it's not that it's 899 pages. It's all of 900 pages long, but the sort of principal impression you get when you read through it is not of length as much as sort of immersion. You know, it's like after a while you sort of grown gills and you're browsing underwater. It's completely weird and really wonderful sensation. I think my role here is as, if you will, principal reader. So what I'll do very quickly is, for those of you who haven't read the novel, just to give you a foothold of some kind, just to indicate the bare bones of it. It's divided into 8 sections plus a prologue and an epilogue. And each of these sections, the main action of virtually all these sections happens in Calcutta. It's very much a kind of a Calcutta-centric novel. But there is, and the action happens mainly in the early 1940s. But there is a Sutradhar-like character who is also connected to the characters of the 40s, who appears a few decades later to try and make sense of the documents, the memories, the scraps, the residues that make up this extraordinary novel. And I think I should also say that, and this is important because when you think of a historical novel, especially one as with a profile as formidable as this one's, the first thing you think of is not that this novel is, which it is, principally a set of just wonderful love stories, of friendships, of love stories, of young people. So all the principal characters in this novel, all the characters who sort of carry the momentum of this novel forward, whose lives we follow through 900 pages, are in their 20s when the novel opens in 1941. So you see their lives sort of flicker and flare and fizzle. It's just an extraordinary experience. But I think the other thing to know is this very large novel is divided into sections which are incredibly compressed in terms of time. So of these 8 sections, 5 essentially happen in the course of a day. So there's a kind of massive simultaneity to this novel. I mean, if English teachers would always talk about the unity of time and place, but you have the unity of time and place in spades in this novel. And the effect of this massive sort of coming together, essentially all their lives periodically are yoked together during these hinge moments. And the effect of this is to sort of suck you in to this novel, to forget that you are maybe 323 pages into a 900-page novel, but so you're completely dissolved in the detail, in the world building that it represents. So the other thing, and I'll come to an end now and let Ruchir take over. The other thing is that with historical novels, especially historical novels as grand as this one, set in a time as momentous as the 1940s, the sort of significance and weight of the historical events, of those hinge moments, tends to lean upon the characters and flatten them. But this doesn't happen here. So the first thing I'm going to do is to ask Ruchir to talk about perhaps the grandest set piece of them all, with which this novel begins, or very close to the beginning, which is the death of Rabindranath Tagore. And the question I'm going to add to this, Ruchir, is how do you, in the course of writing these great hinge moments, how do you strike a balance between the weight of history and the mad, idiosyncratic lives of your characters?
Wow. Is this working?
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. Well, thank you, British Council. Thank you, HarperCollins. Thank you, all of you, for coming. And Mukul, thank you most of all, because one-eyed reading is even more difficult than two-eyed reading. And I expected you to turn a beady eye on the novel, but just cataract-operated beady eye I wasn't expecting. I'm so relieved, actually, is the word, and happy that you like it. One of the things I've managed to do in my life is to put myself in the company of super critical, super acerbic, super sharp friends who are smarter than me, better writers than me, and then I expect them to, we can keep my white balls and tell me where I'm screwing up. And Mukul is one of these people, and for him to like the book is very, very important, very moving, happy-making. Interesting, every time I see copies of this book now, and I was talking to some friends about the process of creating art, and my old analogy used to be that, once you make a film or you do a set of paintings or photographs or write a book, and you release it into the world, it becomes like not quite a child, but a sort of animal creature you made, and it goes and, pees on someone, sits on somebody's lap and endears themselves to that person, or bites someone, or, becomes somebody else's favorite pet, and you have no control over what this damn thing does. And it's kind of semi-animal, semi-machine-like, and I really don't have and it changes shape all the time. It was somebody might find it one thing, and then somebody else 2 weeks later describes the same thing in completely different terms. And part of the joy of putting ourselves through this pain is that when this thing starts shape-shifting, and you realize that actually what you've done is you put a cluster of words or images or whatever together, and it's the recipient, the reader, the viewer who's forming this. Now, it's very exciting to hear Mukul talk about it, and I would rather he spoke about it and I just went, and that would please me, because I've done a few sessions with this book across the country, and I've heard various people give me their reactions, ask me their questions, and anyway, but I understand that I also have to contribute to the conversation. So, So thank you again, Mukul. Yeah, how did I start to work on the book? When I began to work on the book, I knew two or three things. My father was a very well-known Gujarati writer, and I was very close to him. I knew that one of his novels begins with a section of a young Gujarati man, autobiographical novel, attending Tagore's funeral. And that's my father. He comes to Calcutta in 1939, and he's a great lover of literature. He's working in his uncle's business in Bada Bazaar, but his dream is to be a writer and a painter, and he's totally enamored by Tagore, of course, and hero worships him like so many hundreds of thousands of other young men and women. And when Tagore dies, he goes to the funeral, and he actually has a very different description. He goes to the funeral and he sits at the cremation cart and watches the flames, and he describes a young man's thoughts about life and death and poetry and literature and all this stuff. So that's something that I knew that he had written, and he described it to me as well. At the same time, he had also described his other experiences during the war, where he stays back when the threat of Japanese bombing and Japanese attack is imminent. A lot of people, especially the non-Bengalis, the Marwadis, the Gujaratis, the Punjabis, they all leave, whoever can. And a lot of Bengalis also leave. And he says everyone fled, the town emptied out, and it was so wonderful to be in that town alone. But those memories of his had always fascinated me. And then when the soldiers from different countries come into the city, the Americans, the Tommies, he had a run-in with the Americans when they tried to assault. My mother was in Ahmedabad, then not married to my father, but one of her friends had come from Ahmedabad, and these GIs had tried to grab her on Chaurangi, and my dad had fought back, and the MPs had come in and saved him in the nick of time. These stories I grew up with. And then I began to read about the Second World War separately. Then I began to read other Bengali and other people's memories of war in Calcutta. And I realized that there were two things I was fascinated by. I loved Calcutta, I was fascinated by its history. And I was also a Second World War nerd. And the fact that when I read Second World War histories, when we read them, we read about the Blitzkrieg, and we read about the Battle of Britain, we read about Pearl Harbor and Iwo Jima, Tobruk, and all this stuff, but somehow Burma even sometimes, but Calcutta never features in any of these things, because the war doesn't really come to Calcutta. But at the same time, Calcutta is completely shattered by the war because of the famine and because of the partition and all the things that happened. So no one has written that story. So I knew that's something I wanted to explore. I also was fascinated by jazz and the fact that the Great Eastern Hotel and the Grand Hotel and Max's and the Club 300, these were places where there was a lot of great jazz, great debauchery, all mostly Western and wealthy Indian people, cosmopolitan crowd so-called. But that was also going on. Calcutta was a happening place during the war. So that's something that began to fascinate me as well. So when I began to work on the idea of this novel, it was to do, all these elements were there as a kind of palette for which I knew I was going to dip into and work with. And I decided to start with the funeral. And there was, Topan Mojumdar's recounting of the funeral, there's Shotrajit Rai getting pickpocketed at the funeral, there's other things. So I started to put different elements together from those bits. And so the first thing is the characters were introduced one by one into the funeral and their experience of the funeral. And the first draft of the book, which an excerpt was published in Civil Lines in 2009, I think, or 8, there were only 3 characters. There was Gopal, Kedar, and Imogen. There was no Nirupama there, because Nirupama was still forming in my mind as a character, and I wasn't sure that she would come in. I was thinking she'd come in at the middle of the novel. And then I looked at the whole thing again, and I was like, how can she be missing from this moment? There's no question. So I began to rewrite and insert her back into places So to answer your question, I really made it up as I went along. I did have a schematic thing, which I sat down with my friend Meenakshi Ganguly and did in 2005, saying, Acha, she said to me, you need to work out a whole plot even if you don't follow it. And we sat down in Bombay, a monsoon pouring down outside, and we worked out a whole graph of all the big events that happened, what the characters would do, what would happen. etc. sketch. And then, of course, once you made that sketch, then you feel happy and confident that you can actually abandon it as you go along. You slough it off like a snake's tongue. And this has kind of been my process. I'll have a whole wall filled with sticky notes, and then I'll have a whole progression thing, and then I'll have an alternative one, and then I'll tear those all down. And by the time I finish writing the novel, it's got nothing to do with what's on the wall. That's all faint and, you know, like massaging your own brain to, and if it's there, I'm not going to do it like that. So it's difficult to describe, but part of the reason I think the characters didn't get flattened out is that this is such a fecund period. I mean, there are 3 other novels in terms of just historical facts that I've had to keep out of this book. And they're sexy things like, you know, the Muslim League people parachuting down their October monument in the middle of the war. I only discovered this recently. Then the Japanese ambassador, before the war starts, and his wife were in Calcutta, and the Japanese ambassador liked to go to his favorite courtesan, and the spies following them would note that the ambassador would go and visit this Chinese woman, while the wife of the ambassador sat dutifully in the car while her husband finished his business, and he came down. Lovely stuff, no space for it in the book. You know, the bomber command, US bomber command, which brings in the B-29s, one of which eventually, which connects up with the squadron that eventually bombs Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's in Kharagpur, and some of the pilots are in Calcutta. Another great story, no time to follow up. My friend Kai Freezy, who I do not see here today, has been researching and working on a book on flying the hump. American flyers who start flying supplies to Chiang Kai-shek's China through the little dip in the mountains around Burma, which is the most dangerous flying in the world. And then when the USA joins the war, they become official, and that there is that whole supply operation, and he was supposed to write a book about it. I hope he does one day. But lots and lots of stories from there. Again, they barely make it into the book. So it's like, whenever there was a choice to whether to display my historical knowledge or some nice bit of research I'd done, as opposed to a character development, I chose what the character would do, and force the historical event to kind of knock on the door and come in most of the time.
That's a great explanation of the process. As Ruchir suggests, this is a proper war novel, and it's a war novel in a peculiarly sort of daring-do, stylish way. You know, there's in the Great Eastern Hotel, there's this mysterious suite of rooms which belongs to the Octoloni section.
Yeah,
which is
called the section.
The sections. It's called the section.
They're all different names.
So it's a bunch of Brits who are there trying to work out intelligence about how quickly the Japanese are advancing and stuff. And the entire tone of those sections is like a cross between, you know, Len Dayton and Christopher Ishwood. You know, it's just incredibly sort of swish and glamorous and just a thrillingly sort of stylish piece of writing. But apart from the war stuff, you know, I just want to go back to what you said about having to shoehorn Nirupama into the narrative when you had intended her to make her sort of debut later. There's a sense in which, if this novel is about anything, it's about 5 young women actually, who are all in their 20s, early 20s and mid 20s when the novel opens. There is Nirupama, there are her 2 flatmates, Titir and Roma. There's the extraordinarily beautiful Kea, who is also a kind of politically committed person. And there is, of course, the English girl, Imogen. So you have these 5 sort of middle-class girls of different kinds. And then you have, you know, 2 women who have sort of walk-on roles and cameos, who are, say, 10 years older, who Sheali and Radhuni.
They're not 10 years old, they're about the same age.
Are they the same age? Yeah, they're in the 20s as well.
They're a little bit older.
Sounds really.
They're working sex workers.
Yeah, sex workers.
So maybe in the mid-20s or even, no, not necessarily.
Yeah,
early
in the
20s.
mid-20s. So you have you have this cohort of women who come from 2 very different origins. But the one thing they have in common is that they are all trying to make their way as individuals. beyond the ooze of family. And I just wanted to ask you, how difficult is it for a man of your advanced years, to find the appropriate tone to deal with this? Because it works just wonderfully well, that this man of advanced years. But how did you set about the business of owning bodies so radically different from yours?
So, this is a good time perhaps to introduce a distraction. I'm really pleased to show you the new issue. Nilanjan has just walked in, of The Last Jet Engine Laugh, which is my first novel. And I am going to bring it back when I finish this book. I think there are a couple of very strong women characters in the book, but one of the criticisms my women friends leveled at me was that it's all very good and you've got a fighter pilot woman who is in a fighter plane and all that's fine, but it was a futuristic novel. I'd anticipated that women would be in fighter planes and bombing Pakistan. Not outlandish as it turns out from scenes yesterday, day before, but they said you haven't handled the women characters as well as you might have. At least one or two of them are okay, the mother character's fine, but really you could do better. So it was one of the challenges I'd set myself, that for God's sake, try and work the women characters as best as you can. There's also a gay character, who shall not be named right now, and that was also a challenge for a, boring, common garden, heterosexual man like myself. Advanced years, well, Mukul, when I began the book, I was less advanced in years, considerably less advanced, so there was that advantage, but I was still middle-aged already, 40, 42, 43. So, yes, it took work. It took work, and also to imagine these different kinds of women and from different backgrounds was one thing. And as they grow older across the book, what then happens? So, but there were models and there was research stuff. I must mention my friend Kavita Punjabi, who has done wonderful research on the Tebhaga movement and the whole women's movement, starting from the Second World War, where the soldiers filling the town and assaulting the women. There is the Mohila Atmarokha Shamiti, MARS, is formed in Calcutta by Indian and European women with the aim of protecting women of all races and ethnic backgrounds from the depredations of all the soldiers. And that is one of the first feminist groupings that happens in Calcutta. And from that, the communist contingent and the Congress contingent peel off in different directions. The women from there, and the CPI contingent joins into Tebhaga movement, and that the armed revolution from there.
I should just quickly say here that there's this wonderful section in the novel where you have these three young women living together, much to the distress of their parents, living together and in this flat, and they all belong to different political tendencies.
And this actually happened. This is based on reality. Yeah. There were 2 or 3 or maybe even more communes like this around South Calcutta, and it was a rare thing. And these women were actually, this women's solidarity, even while they were doing competing politics. And so these were all models for me, and Kavi's research and her book on the Tebhaga movement was a huge inspiration, a huge fount of information for me. And then, of course, she's a close friend, so I could keep referring to her and bothering her about stuff as well, among other sources. So, yeah, so that was...
So, you noticed that in the course of the last few things that Ruchir said, he produced a perfectly pronounced Bengali sentence because he is, after all, Calcutta Vasi, and the great Calcutta novel has been written inevitably by Gujarati. But the interesting,
Don't tell the Bengali.
the interesting thing about this novel is how Bengali, how Bangla it is, and it's for someone who's not Bengali speaking like me. You read through this novel, and it's not just larded with Bengali. Tagore actually forms a kind of soundtrack to the novel. He turns up all the time in remembered verse, which I suppose is true to life in the context of a Bengali Bhadralok world. But I have to ask you this. When you set about doing this, when you first, Ruchir has this incredibly simple way of dealing with the problem of translation. He'll quote something in Bengali, and he'll immediately translate it. A couple of times he'll allow the paragraphs to progress, and then it'll be explained somewhere later on. But for the most part, it's translated immediately. So I suppose the question I want to ask is, it's something that every Indian writer faces who writes in English. You write a novel principally in English about a world that principally happens not in English. So then you have to make decisions about how you domesticate your narrative, whether whether you lard your narrative with other languages, or you choose some other solution to this. So was this something that just happened, or was it something you took a kind of policy decision on?
Actually, you contributed to it. You've forgotten it so long ago, and you're also getting old. So, but I'll come to that at the end of my answer. So again, back to, I'm sorry to bring in my older child here, but again back to The Last Jet Engine Laugh, which has, if those of you who read it would remember, it's got Bengali, it's got Hindi, it's got Gujarati, it's got French, it's got German, but a lot of Gujarati and Bengali in it actually. And what I perversely decided to do in that book was to not give you the translation immediately, but perhaps on the next page, or through context, or in various perverted, twisted ways that the reader had to go through hoops before they got the translation of whatever was written in Roman, but Gujarati slang, Bengali slang, Hindi, whatever, right? I was invited to the Adelaide Writers Fortnight in 2002, and this woman had done a very close and warm reading of the book, and she said to me she loved it. But on stage, when she stood up and there's 2,000 people there under this tent, she said, I can't do the Aussie accent, but she said, Ruchir has written a great book. I just wish he'd written it in English. And the entire audience explodes, and I was like, oh God, there go my sales. The sales were fine. She praised the book, she talked about it, I read from it. And she also mentioned how the book had all these other languages in it. And I went back and I looked at this novel, and let me get the exact page amount right here. It is, in this paperback version, 374 pages. That's right, it's still 374 pages, hasn't expanded or shrunk. 374 page novel, and I calculated all the non-English, non-European sentences I had used, and the total didn't exceed 4 pages. So I thought, okay, like Indian spices or like strong colors, a little goes a long way, because it's actually not that much. But for someone reading, a European or a Anglo-Australian person reading it, it affected her enough for her to mention it at the very start. So I was like, okay, here's my revenge, because remember when we were starting to read English as kids, you know, you read P.G. Wodehouse and you get menus in French from Anatole the chef, or you get jargon and Biggles and other schoolboy books. You get Robert Graves' Greek references. You get all kinds of Roman references in other books. And there were no internet in those days. There was British Council, and there was USIS, and there were libraries in Calcutta and Delhi, and you had to go and do your research if you wanted to know what that shit meant, and you had to find out about it. And these writers didn't bother and didn't give a damn about what some poor kid sitting in Calcutta or Delhi was going to make of this dense text they were producing. And I was like, why the hell can't the Western reader, rather than wait for a pizza delivery of meaning at home, why can't they also make an effort and find out? So that was the first book. But the second book, I showed you a part of it, a chapter or something, and you were maybe in a bad mood, maybe toothache or something. You said, I don't understand why you have all this Bengali here. I mean, really, you don't need all of it, do you? Kind of thing. And I was like, okay, what's wrong with him now? And I sort of went back and thought about it. I thought, okay, no, he's right. So I said, well, I have to have the Bengali. But I'm just going to translate it right after. I'm not going to do what I did with the first book. And that kind of became very effective. And then when editing the book, a lot of the Bengali was taken out when it was felt unnecessary between me and Rahul Soni. And then some of it was added back in, or other places where I thought, oh no, this needs to be in Bengali given the rhythm. So there was this kind of exchange of Bengali particles across the whole manuscript. as a final edit, one of the final edit scans. And not just the Bengali, but I mean, I just want to stress that I think, to paraphrase Ashish Nandi, that, who says this about cricket, he says cricket is an Indian game invented by the English. I think the English language is an Indian language invented by the English. And anyone who says English is a foreign language, I'm saying that boat has sailed now. It's as much an Indian language as modern Hindi or any of the other languages. And we happily have every right to write in English, and we should revel and bathe and celebrate it, right? Rather than feeling at all ashamed or kind of sheepish about the fact that we're writing in English. I mean, apologies to the spirit of U.R. Ananthamurthy, who I know would disagree with me viscerally, but as he did in Paris at one point, but yeah.
So, moving from this sorority of characters that you deal with so wonderfully well, I think it'd be fair to say that while you don't really, while you have a whole cast of main characters, perhaps the most important character, the one who, in many ways, not just in terms of presence, but also in terms of his artistic efforts, his sort of agonies and frustrations, holds the novel together in some ways, is a character. When we meet him, he's a 22-year-old, spoiled, pretty young man from a zamindar family. He is in fact called zamindar in a kind of affectionate and mocking way by his friend, Zamindir. And his name is Kedarnath Lahiri. And it's interesting that your principal character, I mean, principal by a short hair, but still, in a way, your main character is the spoiled, and in the beginning of the novel, sort of brattish, slightly sexually overheated, a member of a kind of colonial cosmopolitan elite, and you've set him down in the 1940s, where you have all these massive cataclysmic things happening that are going to make his ilk, in a sense, less central to that world than they were. So I suppose my question is, he's also, by the way, important because he is the sort of artistic presence in this novel. He begins as a kind of dilettante artist, and then he becomes more and more serious artist, thwarted and frustrated by his relative lack of success. But in a sense, his reflections on the relationship between his attempts at art, he's a painter, and his attempts to render the world that he saw in the 1940s, most importantly the Bengal famine, are really, in a strange way, the moral center of this book. So why did you choose him? Why Kedar?
It's interesting that you say he is the central character by short hair, because other people have thought of other characters as the central characters, which is good. Because one of the questions asked to me in Calcutta recently was, did you find any of the characters getting greedy for more space, and how did you put them back in their place? And I was like, no, the characters are fighting all the time, and I was fighting with all of them all the time, so it was like a 5-6 way fight. And so I think Kedar is one of the main characters. I think Nirupama is, if not the main character, definitely as important as Kedar, if not more important. And I guess without giving the game away too much, Imogen and the narrator and are also kind of pretty central, and Gopal, the petty pickpocket who becomes a less petty criminal as the novel goes on, is the runaway favorite among most readers who have come back to me saying, oh, I love Gopal. I'm like, okay, but what about the other guys? No, they're all good, but Gopal. So I'm glad to see this is fluctuating a bit. Kedar is close to me in a lot of people say, we see you in Kedar, and Kedar is not me. He's wealthy, he's good looking, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. When he starts, he can't paint. I could paint from a very young age. He has an MG sports car. I never had such a thing. He has success with women. We'll leave that, in my case, we will leave that unexplored. There are many things about Kedar that's very much not me. I mean, it's modeled on a couple of people I knew in terms of how they would speak and their drawl. People say he speaks like Satyajit Ray. He doesn't. He and Rai would have had an overlapping upper class Bengali accent, and it would be a drawl. But Kedar's would be more to the manner born. Rai was more worked on. He actually learned it and found it and worked on it, whereas Kedar would have had his parents and his uncles and all speaking like that from the get-go. And he becomes a painter, but again, success eludes him, but he also loses his money and his wealth at some point and becomes an alcoholic. Whatever, all these graphs are there, but I also like the idea of the painted image processing what had gone on years ago, years earlier, and trying to make art out of something that you're only beginning to understand, or you understand differently through the rendering of that image or that thought through a painting or something. Because I was going through this very turbulent period when I was writing this novel, and it had nothing to do with my novel, which was basically 9/11 happens, Afghanistan war, Iraq war, all the turmoil that's going on politically in India at that time, then the Arab Spring, then, all these things take place around the world, and then, all the stuff that's taking place in India. I'm trying to connect it to my novel and thinking, what am I commenting on? And I'm like, forget about it. You're writing about this time, and your novel will find the connections to the contemporary time when it comes out in its own way. And that is where the whole idea of Kedar looking back at the 1940s and obsessed by a certain period of the 1940s in his painting much later in life, that began to fascinate me. So
you mentioned Gopal as a competitor in the stakes for the most important character. Gopal is this extraordinary character. He is, we meet him early on in the novel. I won't give anything away, but he's basically he belongs. He's a young man, and he belongs to Calcutta's underworld. And there's an obviously sort of Dickensian aspect to Calcutta in its sprawl, its inequality, its filth. And appropriately in Ruchir's novel, you have a kind of Fagin-like character who goes under the name of Ustad, whose real name is Shamsuddin, who runs a bunch of men. They have wonderful names. One person is called Aurangzeb, the other person is called Gaurangzeb. And Gopal is the apprentice sort of thief. He's sort of apprentice pickpocket and thief who, as the reader learns, gets promoted above his station in the ranks of the gangland. And one of the most entertaining, one of the most savagely entertaining parts of this book is the sort of choreographed violence that Gopal and Aurangzeb and Gaurangzeb and Ustad orchestrate. There's this wonderful dockside piece of violence which should actually be anthologized. It's just for its sort of Guy Ritchie-esque sort of spectacle. You can see that Ruchir has designs upon not just you as a reader, but also the poor Bakra who's about to be killed. So when you move from this high Bhadro world of, say, Lahiri, and this very sort of middle-class Bhadrok world of these young women to the world that these people inhabit, black marketing in everything from caviar to rice. Did you research this?
a bit, but not. I mean, I knew of stuff. There's Shumanta Banerjee's books on criminal underbelly of Calcutta from the 19th century onwards, and a lot of it I made up. I mean, I knew there was crime, I knew there was smuggling, I knew there was black marketing, I knew there were connections in the shipping yards, and there were different gangs handling different parts of the business in Calcutta, just as they were in New York. This much I knew, and then the rest I imagined some, and yeah.
That's very nice to know. It's nice to know that you made it up, because
Yeah.
all too often
No,
novels-
but without again giving away too much, a certain trajectory that you find later in the book of a certain kind of achieved criminal who is also a very educated and a very sophisticated person. There were people like that in Calcutta in the 70s and 80s, aficionados of art and rustics who were also criminal. So that's actually again based on reality.
Okay, I want to move on to an aspect of of the novel which is both central to the novel as well as one that is sort of looked at elliptically in many ways through a couple of brief passages. It's looked at head on, which is of course the famine of 43. Because the interesting thing about the novel is that the big blocks of it that deal with specific days begin in late 41 and end in 1943, essentially with the famine. But the famine is also processed through the minds of the characters, partly through the Sutradhar character and his conversations with people as they age outside of the essential scope of the novel. So, there are a couple of bits which I don't know if you could find them or read them. There are a couple of bits where characters deal directly with the horror of the famine.
I can read one bit. I was hoping to do the Stalingrad bit, but maybe you can end with that later or something like this.
Great.
I can definitely find one famine bit which I have read before in another gathering, but I'm happy to do it now. Yeah, so we planned out to see. Let me get. Okay, so one of the conceits of the book is that, and it starts with the Tagore funeral itself, is that, and again, this is again based on, partly based on reality and partly imagined, is that the British military establishment has these very small, light reconnaissance planes, and actually slightly heavier reconnaissance planes for further reconnaissance and long distance reconnaissance. And these planes are used to photograph the processions and the riots and whatever's taking place as a kind of early surveillance, aerial surveillance device. So it allowed me to get above the Tagore funeral and describe it from above as well at one point. And so every now and then the novel goes up higher than a drone shot really, but looking down onto the city as a map, and then it comes back down. So this is one occasion where, and one of the characters in the book is a pilot who's a reconnaissance pilot working in the secret intelligence unit in the hotel. But he also, with his assistant, goes flying every now and then. So, so this is a flight that's taking place after the major Quit India movement starts on the 8th of August 1942. The Congress leaders are arrested, and then the protests begin all over the country. No, that's right. Protests begin all over India, and 13th August is a big upheaval day on Wellington Square, where a lot of blood is spilled through lathi charges and stuff, and then the next day onwards, there is actually bloodshed when people are shot. So this is a plane that's flying over the city after these things have taken place. At that point, what might remain of your flight is a circling sweep west of the governor. The plane is flying over it early in the morning looking at Calcutta. Over Governor House, the river, and Howrah station, before you begin to descend over the racecourse that is also now crowded with tents, camouflage war equipment, the aircraft still turning, pointing north again and lining up with the straight stretch of red road on which it will land. Before all that, however, just as you bank left from the smoldering mess of the 5-way crossing at Chaurangi and Dharamtola, you would fly over the sprawl of the Great Eastern Hotel with the warren of cabins and storerooms on its roof terrace. You could take an alternative route, and you would cross the river, and you'd come back to the hotel, the cockpit windows rattling in the breeze coming over the water, and take the plane in a curve over the almost completed new bridge and Howrah station. You would then come back over the Hooghly, perhaps flying over Governor House to slow down over the Great Eastern. In this approach, you would spot dull olive green vehicles lined up outside the hotel, the roof and bonnet of many of them painted with the white, five-pointed star of the US Army. Because the Americans by now have come into Calcutta and have begun to occupy large chunks of the city with their soldiers. In either case, whether flying in from the south or the north, looking down you would see a section at the southern end of the hotel's terrace, fenced off with high netting to protect a rust-colored surface painted with a familiar design of neat white lines. With the sun strengthening towards what is sure to be a sweltering noon, on this rectangle of red-brown, you would see two figures engaging in short dance movements, yanking their shadows this way and that in the jerky choreography of a game of tennis. From the smack of the gut strings, the ball climbs and curves over the wire netting. Lambert's eyes follow it as it drops, obeying the parabola initiated by the racket until it passes the jut of the hotel building. It then develops a will of its own, plummeting straight down towards the lane below. The furry white orb parts company with the stained whitewash of the hotel. Remember, tennis balls were white at this point and not yellow as they became later. The furry white ball orbs parts company with the stained whitewash of the hotel and becomes a planet against the dark grey of the road. It hits the asphalt, comes back up, the dot enlarging and receding and enlarging again until it bounces quietly towards the hooves of a pony tethered to a churi gari. Before it can go under the horse, there's a blur of rags, a small child running to the ball, trying to grab it. The ball evades the first snatch, but the kid traps it on the second attempt, down on all fours now. The boy moves away from the churi gari, protecting the ball from the disinterested pony. A few feet down the street, he stops, looks around, squats down, and brings the thing to his mouth, teeth ready. Lambert's stomach tightens as the boy bites into the ball. The boy's head jerks back in shock, the dirty white wool unyielding, the hard rubber underneath hurting his teeth. But he doesn't give up, turns the thing and looks for another opening. This time, the kid tries the seam, trying to suck it open, but the ball repels him again. The face turns upwards, and even from this distance, Lambert can see the enlarged eyes, wide, staring at the sky, uncomprehending. The kid's stomach heaves, trying to bring out a howl, but he can only manage a scraping of breath. Not something Lambert can actually hear, yet he can. After a beat, Lambert realizes it's his own breath that's replicating what is beyond earshot. A woman, not old, yet ancient in her movement, comes out from behind the row of horse carriages and bends over the howling boy. She takes the ball from his hand, examines it, smells it, and then flings it away towards a runnel of water at the edge of the road. She grabs the boy's arm and drags him back into the shadows.
There's another bit which is very moving, where you have two of the girls, I think Neeru, encountering two women from Kamila.
Yes.
Where and the horror of it is encapsulated in the fact that when they speak, this ghostly rasp comes out, but of course it's in a dialect that she can barely understand.
Yeah, because this is all United Bengal, which is stretches from Assam and the northeast, what we call, all the way to Bihar and Orissa. And it is full of all these different Bengalis, from Sylheti, Komila, Rajshahi, all the Midnapur accents, the North Bengal accents, everything. It's a subcontinent actually, in a weird kind of way. And Himalaya to the sea, all kinds of terrain. People tried to make Bengal into a country. One of the deals was they were hoping to tell the British that, hey, let India and Pakistan fight it out, but we want a united Bengal. Didn't take off, but there was an idea. There was an attempt to do that. Faizul Haq and all these people. So, so that whole place is hit by that.
But there's another bit completely different from this, which shows, which has these two prostitutes in age doing the opposite of starving to death. This is the 1970s. The Sutradhar character is interviewing these women who are central to the action of much that happens in the novel. They're two old madams now, and there's this one of them who used to be, very beautiful in a kind of busty way, is now just very large, and she's having her favorite drink.
Yeah. So the Sutradhar has gone to meet them. The pink label says Sheali Radhuni, second meeting, first recording, 27th March 1977. At the second meeting, it was a different girl who served us. This one kept her eyes to herself. Maybe it was to do with her character, or more likely, the Mashis had come to the conclusion that I was a different kind of trick, that my areas of potential profit lay somewhere above my belt. Maybe it was because I'd gone in the evening that time and the other girl had finished her shift, or perhaps gone off to actually do it. The girl put down her plates in front of me. It occurred to me that both the girls were what you call shamula, dusky, and I wondered whether that was connected to my own complexion or just a coincidence, contradicting my earlier thought about my below-belt profitability. We got you these to start with because you'd said the other day, Mashima, they look so dangerous, you shouldn't have. They're for us also, you provide the excuse. Otherwise, with this Radhuni sugar, the doctor would fry us in hot oil. I'm the only one who has sugar, I see. You can't compare my sugar with yours, mine is nothing. Nothing, 185 is nothing, is it? You just keep quiet, you want me to tell Dr. Babu how much gin and Fanta you've been quaffing? I'll telephone him right now. It was the first time I was actually getting a look at Radhuni Mashi, who'd remained the acid voice from the TV bedroom all through our previous meeting. She was like a Luigi Botero portrait, but painted by a Kalighat pot painter. The armchair which she occupied seemed in constant danger of collapsing. Her flesh, as it cascaded down, overflowing across the arms of the chair, seemed as though it would make insurrections, break loose from under her sari, and float away in separatist blobs of fat, but it didn't. All of it, all of her, stayed there across the evening, sliding this way and that, but managing to hang on to whatever deeply buried skeleton she must, by physiological rationality, have possessed. Both of them had put on nice saris, as it was a special occasion, or maybe it was just that they liked to dress up on Sunday nights to rev the old engines, as it were. Radhuni's sari was yellow with a spiky black and indigo border of the kind Kalighat Patuas loved to paint. Her face was caked with makeup, which buried her eyes further and made them seem smaller, despite the generous bordering of kajol. There was a glinting orange glass of gin and Fanta attached to the big planet, a haphazardly orbiting moon, circling slowly but regularly from the tea table in front of her, making its way around her belly and chest to find shaky docking with her mouth before orbiting back. I didn't at all intend to think meanly of her. It's just that I wondered how he would have painted her today, or even sketched her, and when I tried to imagine this, my mind began to wander.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I just want to end with something which I think would be remiss not to mention, which is how music is threaded right through this novel. I mean, as someone who is universally regarded by his friends as tone deaf and unable to appreciate music, it struck me even more that all kinds of music. There's the two ladies we've been talking about, Singh Khayal and Dhumri, and everybody in this novel is a rasik of one kind or another. It's either Rabindra Sangeet or one of the more important characters in this novel, by implication, is in fact a jazz player, and jazz has a really significant role in establishing mood and atmosphere, and indeed characters in the Great Eastern Hotel. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I was actually, given the situation we're in currently, wanted to read something to finish perhaps, but before that I could talk very briefly. Yeah, I think music, different kinds of music, khayal, jazz, Rabindra Sangeet, and towards the end, folk music of different kinds, the blues, all these made their way into the novel. There were some of them were part of the reason I began writing the book, like jazz, as I told you, but Rabindra Sangeet very quickly also became very central, especially the song Akla Chalo, but also other songs. Nazrul comes in when Nazrul Islam does his great Kali Bhajan, Kalume Paye Tola, which is the look at the light under the black girl's feet. The black girl, of course, being Kalima, and the light under her black feet, which is a very moving Shama Shomit, as you would call it. That's there as well. So, I mean, these things wove their way in across the writing, which took, as you know, about 20 years. So, different things felt appropriate, but it was also, somebody in Bombay called it a polyphonic novel, but it's also a polymusical novel because there's different voices, but there's also these different musics that were part of people's lives in those days, which helped me form a certain kind of armature for the book as well.
Shall we end with sort of appropriate reading
Yeah.
in the context of the present moment?
Yes, I was going to just. So, this is the character Nirupama, who has come home. She's moved out of her parents' house in Shambazar, and she has moved to South Calcutta. But now she has come home after a while, after about a month maybe, and she has a habit. One of her places where she likes to go in this house is to go up to the terrace and stand there and look at the city. So it's just a description of that moment, really. As soon as her mother leaves, Neeru wraps herself in a shawl, skips quickly to the top of the stairs, and goes out on the terrace. She's been hoping to catch the sunset, but she's too late. There is still a bright stain across the western horizon, but the city is rapidly sinking into its smoky winter gloom. Downstairs, she has heard the evening azan start from the big mosque on Chitpur Road, with the other mosques following. The overlapping calls are just fading as she reaches the terrace. After a few moments of silence, almost as if on cue, the first conch shell blows from a nearby house, another shark picking up the long honk, and then another and another, until she feels she's in an invisible forest, surrounded by trees of rising sound. It's something she always waits for when she's on the terrace at this moment of dusk. Her body remembers it since childhood. As the darkness thickens, Neeru can smell the incense from nearby houses. A few minutes later, this is followed by the smell of coals catching as ununs are lit across the neighborhood for the evening's cooking. Everything is very familiar and comforting, but something is missing, and it takes her a minute to realize what it is. Normally, the azan and shark blowing would be accompanied by lights coming on in all the houses and streets below. The blackout imposed 10 days ago means the layers of buildings all blend into a dark mass. The yellow glow of the lampposts is gone. It's as if someone has stolen the lanes below. There are still little rebellions of illumination leaking from a window here, a balcony there, but overall it feels as though someone has taken a massive brush and painted the city black. Looking around, Neeru realizes she hasn't been up here since she moved out to Dover Road in September. Even though she's been missing her parents, she's been glad to see her mother go, giving her this little stretch of time to herself. Yeah, I think it's just stop here actually, because it goes on. But we should probably
I think
question and answers
run out of time. I just wanted to say that one of the enormous advantages of reading a 900-page novel is that it gives you room to genuinely fall in love with the characters. So in the second half of the novel, as it cascades towards its end, I felt in a way that I hadn't for many years, a kind of real sentimental attachment to the lives of these people, and periodic relief that, oh, she didn't come to a bad end, and this person survived the rigors of the 40s. It's a wonderful novel. It's just completely and utterly satisfying.
Thank you. Do we have questions? Do we have time for questions? I just want to mention again, sorry to be the sort of the bookseller here, but this has just come into my hands, so I'm so excited about it. This is a cover by Itu Chowdhury, the same man and the same team that did this. And it's a reissue from HarperCollins. Thank you, Naya. Thank you, Udayan, who's not here, and the whole Harper team. This is supposed to piggyback on Great Eastern Hotel, so please, if you haven't read it, or if you read it a long time ago, or you want to add to your collection, pick it up again. It's in the bookshops. With this very recognizable, lovely new cover. Different book about a different war in the future, and that future is now. So you might find it interesting to compare the previous blackout with future blackouts. Do we have time for questions, or is it already?